Kings. Joash, the boy king. The revolt against Athaliah. After waiting 6 years, Jehoiada the priest decided that it was time to take action. He made a pact with 5 army officers. They traveled to all the cities of Judah and brought back with them to Jerusalem the Levites and all the heads of the clans. They all gathered in the temple, and there they made a covenant with Joash, the king's son. Jehoiada said to them, "Here is the son of the late king. He is now to be king, as the Lord promised that King David's descendants would be." The Levites and the people of Judah carried out Jehoiada's instructions. Jehoiada gave the officers the spears and shields that had belonged to King David and had been kept in the temple. He stationed the men with drawn swords all round the front of the table to protect the king. Then Jehoiada led Joash out, placed the crown on his head, and gave him a copy of the laws governing kingship. And so he was made king. Jehoiada the priest and his sons anointed Joash, and everyone shouted, "Long live the king!" Athaliah heard the people cheering for the king. So she hurried to the temple, where the crowd had gathered. There she saw that the new king at the temple entrance, surrounded by the army officers and the trumpeters. All the people were shouting joyfully and blowing trumpets, and the temple musicians with their instruments were leading the celebration. She tore her clothes in distress and shouted, "Treason, treason!" Jehoiada did not want Athaliah killed in the temple area, so he called out the army officers and said, "Take her out between the rows of gods and kill anyone who rescues her." They seized her, took her to the palace, and there at the horse gate they killed her. The priest Jehoiada got King Joash and the people to join him in making a covenant that they would be the Lord's people. Then they all went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and idols there and killed the priest of Baal in front of the altars. Joash became king of Judah at the age of 7, and he ruled in Jerusalem for 40 years. His mother was Gibeah from the city of Beersheba. He did what was pleasing to the Lord as long as Jehoiada the priest was alive. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for King Joash, and they bore him sons and daughters. After he had been king for a while, Joash decided to have the temple repaired. He ordered the Levites to make a box for contributions and to place it at the temple gate. They sent word throughout Jerusalem and Judah for everyone to bring to the Lord the tax which Moses, God's servant, had first collected in the wilderness. This pleased the people and their leaders, and they brought their tax money and filled the box with it, and so they collected a large sum of money. The king and Jehoiada would give the money to those who were in charge of repairing the temple, and they hired stonemasons, carpenters, and metal workmen to make the repairs. All the workmen worked hard, and they restored the temple to its original condition, as solid as ever. As long as Jehoiada was alive, Sacrifices were offered regularly at the temple. After reaching the very old age of 130, he died. They buried him in the royal tombs in David's city in recognition of the service he had done for the people of Israel, for God, and for the temple. But once Jehoiada was dead, the leaders of Judah persuaded King Joash to listen to them instead. So the people stopped worshipping in the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and began to worship idols and the images of the goddess Asherah. Their guilt for these sins brought the Lord's anger on Judah and Jerusalem. Then the spirit of the God took control of Zechariah, son of Jehoiada the priest. He stood where the people could see him and called out, "The Lord God asks why you have disobeyed his commands and bringing disaster on yourselves. You abandoned him, so he has abandoned you." King Joash joined in a conspiracy against Zechariah, and on the king's orders the people stoned Zechariah in the temple courtyard. The king forgot about the loyal service that Zechariah's father Jehoiada had given him, and he had Zechariah killed. As Zechariah was dying, he called out, "May the Lord see what you are doing and punish you." When autumn came that year, the Syrian army attacked Judah and Jerusalem, killed all the leaders, and took large amounts of loot back to Damascus. The Syrian army was small, but the Lord let them defeat a much larger Judean army because the people had abandoned him, the Lord God of their ancestors. In this way, King Joash was punished. He was severely wounded, and when the enemy withdrew, 2 of his officials plotted against him and killed him in his bed to avenge the murder of the son of Jehoiada the priest. He was buried in David's city, but not in the royal tombs. The records of how he rebuilt the temple was written in the book of Kings. After the death of King Joash, his son Amaziah succeeded him as king.